You guys, welcome to another episode of Soft Rebellion. My name is Ndata and thank you so much for joining me. So today I am very sad. I'm really saddened by the realization that the divide between Black South African men and women is much bigger than I initially thought. Sometime last year when I just started my TikTok account, I spoke about how I thought South African women and men are incompatible. And it's in how we approach relationships, romantic relationships more specifically, in how we see the world. And the more I interact with men and potential romantic partners, the more I realize just how far apart we are. And I say this on the precipice of Women for Change led march on the 21st of November against gender-based violence and femicide, and the call to declare that as a national disaster. And every time I have conversations with men, I'm always flabbergasted really by how tone deaf they are, how blind. And maybe saying blind is putting it lightly, because I think there's a refusal to see us, to see women as people, as equals, as beings that are autonomous outside of men's control, in one way or the other. And I say it's a deliberate refusal, because when I think about how Black men see us and how they interact with us, it reminds me of the relationship between Black people and white people. Just the blatant disregard for our lives, our humanity. And that's how I feel about Black men. And it's so unfortunate, because if you know me, that I love us. I love being Black, and I love Black men specifically. I want to have Black babies. I want to take pride in having the blackest family. My friend Rena would say, "Oh, I wanted an African baby." And Rainbow is that kid, I want an African family. I want I matched with this guy earlier in the year. His name is Jack, and he's Xhosa. I've never been with a Xhosa guy before, and I just enjoyed the ease with which we understood each other without saying much. And sometimes I find myself breaking out into Xhosa. I switch between English and isiXhosa. When I do that, I don't always pay attention, right? But there was no need to, track back and correct myself, because Jack just understood it, And I'm not one who's really obsessed about the idea of marriage, but I could fantasize about bringing our families together and how beautiful that whole Xhosa interaction would be, just paying homage to our cultures, the beautiful parts of our cultures. And I want to be able to pass that down to my kids through language, I think sometimes using a secondary language like English does lose the true essence of some of, our customs. And I want to be able to tell stories to my kids in my own language, and for them to interact with their grandparents in isiXhosa, you know what I mean? So my deep love and admiration for Black men is real, Xhosa men included. I never thought that was the case, but I suppose Jack then has, unveiled a new aspect to this. That said, it's unfortunate that more and more I'm starting to believe that I'm less likely to end up with a Xhosa man or a Black man, a Black South African man. it is very unlikely that I'm gonna settle down with a South African man, because the ones I've interacted with are just, and the shocking thing is, these are educated men. My caliber of potential partners have to be educated. My standard is that they must have, a higher level of education. They must be professionals or entrepreneurs, or, seeking knowledge and be educated. It doesn't always have to be through formal means, but beyond school, in what ways are they also, pursuing knowledge to empower themselves, to know, to learn, to challenge their ideas. I remember the one guy on TikTok, I called him almost perfect Bumble guy, because he really was incredible. One of the things we connected about was his awareness about, the gender-based violence predicament in the country, and the fact that he had committed to do something about it. He said, as someone with sisters and a mom and nieces, I want to make the difference. And it was really admirable to hear a Zulu man speak like this, because it is very rare, to be quite honest. But later on, the more we interacted, I realized that all he did was just learn the language. He was just regurgitating the nice things that we wanted to hear. But actually, in practice, he's probably one of the most controlling people that I've been in talking stages with. I remember him telling me about how his mom couldn't walk around their house without covering his head, even if it was just her kids and the husband. The husband, which would be his dad, refused to have his wife walk around the house without covering. It was a sign of disrespect. And he said, I'm not controlling, I'm not abusive. And his assertion was on the basis of what his dad used to do. But I think there's aspects of control that he still maintained and that he wanted to impose on me, even though to him it may not have been the case, because at least it's not as bad as his dad. He wanted to control what I wear, how I present myself on social media, whether or not I get tattoos. And I'm like, why is that even an issue? Like, why are we talking about that? But I think it mattered to him how I appeared on the outside, getting everyone's validation, his friends mostly, and his family. So being with me wouldn't have been something that we do for our sake, but for approval as well. It would have been for external approval. And that really fed into the idea that they don't see us. Black men just don't see us. And I mean, I am generalizing, right? But I'm really curious to know the extent to which women who are in committed relationships with black men can discuss these issues honestly and openly without feeling like they're being silenced, without feeling like their partners don't understand them. Because I would hate to be a rape apologist or to be with one, And I suppose what triggered this crash out as well is another person I'd matched with on Bumble. And I mean, I had already decided yesterday when he told me that he's got a kid that this is not going to go any further. But I suppose he was finding it difficult to let go, and I indulged him. Eventually, I asked him about his deal breakers, and he told me dishonesty, the likes. And in the list, he mentioned feminism, and he says, excuse me, I just ate. He says to me, modern day feminists are his deal breakers. And I'm like, oop, I'm a feminist, so clearly this wasn't going to work. And he says, describe your understanding of feminism. That question also bothered me, because I'm like, why are you trying to qualify the type of feminist I am and whether or not I'm palatable to your taste, Anyway, I indulged him still. And I was really waiting for him to reveal himself, because all along he had presented a very perfect image. Although it didn't work, because I still couldn't overlook the fact that he had a kid, right? I do want to be a first-time mom with a first-time dad. So that's a non-negotiable for me. Anyway, he then exposes himself and he says, there's certain traditional principles that he still abides by, or that he cherishes and are important in maintaining society. And he says those are so fundamental and important in how society functions and keeping the family unit together. And I say to him, but women's oppression has been what drives society, women's free labor, child caring, and domestic chores, taking care of the elderly and the sick, all of those social welfare activities are often performed by women, and that's truly what keeps society together, with no compensation or recognition for that work. You know what I mean? And then he deviates towards the argument that, okay, but the men that I'm calling rapists and violent and abusers and whatnot, who raises them? Essentially shifting the blame to women, because they do grow up. I mean, majority of women in South Africa raise children by themselves. I was checking the statistics today. There's 44% of female-headed households. So the probabilities of kids growing up without their dad are that high, and only something like 4% grows up with just the men, and then the rest grow up in two-parent households. And to qualify his argument, he was trying to find out if I grew up in a two-parent household. And I said, of course I did. And I think that shocked him then, or diffused his line of questioning, because he would have used that as, to make a point. But anyway, I am trailing off. I was just so struck by that conversation, and it was so disheartening, because it's not the first time I've had that interaction with men, educated men. I'm not even talking about men who can't read or who can't think logically. These are industry leaders. These are people who take on prominent positions at work, solve problems, are entrusted with millions of rands in budget, but somehow this particular issue just doesn't seem to translate. And that's why I think it is deliberate, and I think part of the reason why men refuse to acknowledge the issues, because they're also complicit. I think how men are brought up promotes a lot of rape culture and the subjugation of women. It's almost as if our rights and our choices don't matter. You see it even in the pop culture, where there would be songs about getting women drunk so that they can take advantage of that. And this is something people joke about, to say, I must get you drinks and take advantage of you, to a point where if you go out on a date with a man and refuse to go home with him, he also feels entitled, and he will be spewing, insults at you if it doesn't even get physical. There's a serious danger to how we live our lives, which men aren't subjected to, and yet they will still bring up the fact that, but women also make false accusations about rape or being, beaten up, or that men also experience violence, even though men are likely to experience violence at the hands of other men, or the fact that men are 20 times likely to get raped compared to the people who make false accusations about rape. You know what I mean? And someone was saying the reason why men like to maintain or hold on to these false accusation statistics is because they know that if their homeboys or they have been convicted of rape, they could just easily blame false accusations to get away with it, But yeah, it's a scary world to live in. And I suppose the dilemma for me is that, yes, I've got, these romantic ideas about the kind of family structure I want and the kind of partnership I want and with who I want that partnership with. But at the same time, the reality is that the kind of men we have in this society are so far removed from the general sentiment that women share. I think about how boy children are raised compared to how we were raised. Boys barely had any responsibility, they weren't raised with the moral standards that were enforced on girl children. And I remember my dad also celebrating that my half brother had impregnated a girl, even though we're at the same age. And he freaked out when he saw me walking with the boy in town. And I'm like, but I don't understand that reaction when you had just thrown a party, basically. It wasn't a party, being umcimbi, a traditional ceremony for my brother, who's exactly the same age as me. We were both born in 94. For having impregnated a girl. Who do you think that girl is? There's a mother somewhere and a father somewhere who's lamenting the fact that their daughter has just gotten pregnant. Their young daughter. So obviously boys out there would also see me the same if that's how you raise men. Men aren't growing up in isolation. They grow up in society amongst girls. So are you promoting that they sleep around with who? So I think part of the reason I started this podcast as well was to have this kind of conversation. And I think my hope was that would find a common ground. I realized that we're on very extreme ends as men and women, and we're just screaming at each other without truly understanding and finding common ground. I just don't see what the common ground is on this one. Like, it's not something I'm prepared to compromise on. And that's why I think we're in deeper trouble than I initially thought. I don't know what the solution is. Unless men are willing to be honest with themselves and are willing to take accountability, I don't see how we're going to get out of this one. And maybe when we refuse to form relationships with them and have children with them and procreate, only then will they take this seriously. Although I do worry that, that protest may also exacerbate the violence that we're seeing in this country. If 1 in 3 women are likely to be sexually violated in their lifetime, and mind you, that statistics doesn't account for the cases that go unreported. How much worse will it get if we don't address this issue? If men are just so blatantly refusing to acknowledge the issue, when are we gonna get to a place where we find solutions? I also hate how gender-based violence is always seen as a women's issue. Like, oh, we stand with you guys, but women aren't abusing each other, and women aren't raping each other. Women are not beating each other. Men are doing that. And men will also come in and say, yeah, but men get raped too. And they do. And they're likely to get raped by other men. And when they report their cases of violence at police stations, it's other men who laugh at them. And I wish all of that would prove the point that, hey, there's something deeper here. There's something very wrong in our society. Can we address it? But they would still frame this as a women's issue. And it's not a women's issue. So, yeah, guys, I've just digressed so much. I don't even know where I started. And I guess today there's no moment of rebellion. I don't see how we find common ground with this one. I was telling my friend yesterday how about how yes, I may be open to dating, other races, but there's certain things about, dating other races that irk me. I remember seeing profiles. This guy was saying he's open to, multiracial relationships, and that annoys the hell out of me. I don't know what about it is so triggering, but I'm always like, love yourself. Like, why is it necessary for you to say that? I don't even entertain people who say that or put that on their profile, because it's just so annoying to me. And maybe I haven't even unpacked what it's about, but I just know it annoys me, right? Anyway, yesterday I had gone on a date with this guy. He's a colored guy. He's cute. And I don't know how we veered off to this conversation, but my friend and I were talking about the fact that I don't like white men or, colored men or whichever other races that tries to act black. It's not something that I find fascinating. Or when they attempt to speak my language, like, it's not something that I'm going to enjoy, because now I have to congratulate you or applaud you for the barest minimum, even though I'm so fluent in your language, you know what I mean? And yet I'm expected to now clap hands for you for butchering my language, So I was glad that the guy yesterday wasn't even trying to do those gimmicks. I would have been annoyed and probably left the date early. And it was a pleasant date, by the way. But yeah, so just the prospect of dating outside my race, white men specifically, I still haven't reconciled with that. And maybe then the alternative is dating colored men, Indian men, although I've also heard stories about those. Asian men, I'm very keen to actually see what that's like. But of course, in South Africa, we don't have a lot of Asian population. And I suppose black men from the diaspora. One of the, nicest people, I remember this guy from Ghana, perfect gentleman, so those are the alternatives. But obviously, it does require that I rewire some of those expectations I've had about passing down my culture through language, and just being understood in the smallest things without needing to explain. Like, I remember making sour porridge in the morning for breakfast, and Jack just got it because there's a shared understanding there, and I suppose dating outside of one's culture and race means a loss of those things, although you can try to rebuild with someone and, explain the cultural significance of certain things. But yeah, that's the only alternative. I think right now, like I'm enough. If I date a black man, a black South African man, it will have to be someone so exceptional, someone that I can be fully myself without tiptoeing. Like, I don't know if you guys in relationships can truly exist as yourselves, or you have to censor or find yourself also taking their stance, because, okay, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Yeah, no, that would be a nightmarish situation for me if I found myself in a relationship where I had to be a rape apologist, Anytime we talked about issues of gender-based violence and femicide, would say, hey, but also these women. Can you imagine? Can Can you imagine? I would die. Or a relationship where a man is obsessed about me showing my body, even if I'm at the beach, like they're just so obsessed about having this control on my body or how I appear to the rest of their family that I'm not free to live life. And I'm just like, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna end this here. Oh, I'm just so exasperated today. Anyway, guys, I don't have a cute closing. I'm just gonna end this here. And I hope it's given you something to think about. I'm really curious to hear what your experiences have been. I don't know how I can facilitate a more conversational approach to this podcast, but I'll figure it out. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me. I don't take this lightly. I hope to see you again at the next one. I do want to shout out to Poland. I think I've just added another country to the list. We are officially streaming in 13 countries, or we've got listeners across 13 countries. So thank you so much, you guys. I truly, truly appreciate this. Each and every one of you, every download, every listen, every share, I do appreciate it. From me, good night. Sanbona on the next one.